Hey guys, tonight we begin in a land of dust and drums where banners flap in the dry wind and the clatter of bronze weapons echoes across valleys. You are standing on a battlefield of the Warring States period, centuries of endless skirmishing where 7 great kingdoms claw at each other like squabbling siblings who just so happen to own armies. Soldiers march, farmers groan, and lords draw maps in the sand that will be redrawn tomorrow. It is chaos. It is exhausting. And into this swirl of mud and ambition strides one young ruler of the Qin state with a gaze like sharpened steel and a to-do list that reads something like conquer everyone, unify everything, and maybe invent the world's longest commute. You probably won't survive this era, at least not with your modern coffee habits. One wrong banner, one misplaced allegiance, and you're back hoeing fields until the tax collector notices you're breathing too loudly. The people here dream of stability, but get served battle after battle. Then suddenly, from the west, the Qin begin to rise. They've got reforms discipline, and a leader who believes micromanaging should extend to the entire known world. Qin Shi Huang, first emperor of China. His name alone will become shorthand for relentless construction and restless ambition. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And while you're here, let me know in the comments where you're tuning in from and what time it is for you. It's always fascinating to see who's drifting off from Tokyo at midnight and who's dozing in Texas at noon. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You wander forward into the Qin heartland, a place of rugged hills and disciplined soldiers. Qin Shi Huang begins as the king of Qin at only 13, though adults run the kingdom until he comes of age. Already the Qin state is built on strict legalist principles. Laws like iron punishments, harsh enough to make you seriously reconsider jaywalking, and rewards so practical that even ambitious farmers can dream of climbing social ranks. You step into villages where peasants are drilled like soldiers, and taxes are organized with an efficiency that would make modern bureaucrats blush. Mainstream historians agree that these strict reforms gave Qin its edge, standardized laws, tough discipline, and a laser focus on military power. It's not glamorous, but it gets results. Still, historians argue whether Qin's success was due mostly to these legalist systems or simply geography. The Qin state had fertile river valleys and mountains shielding its flanks. Either way, Qin is rising, and every road in this story leads to unification. You picture yourself trudging with one of those armies, bronze armor clanking crossbow in hand, watching the smoke of rival states' cities curling on the horizon. There's something both terrifying and weirdly comforting about how inevitable Qin's conquest feels like a slow-rolling thundercloud that everyone sees coming, but no one can stop. And here's your quirky tidbit of the night. The Qin were so obsessed with discipline that one general supposedly had his own son executed for being late to muster. Imagine explaining to your boss that you slept through the rooster crow, and the punishment is, well, let's just say stricter than a warning email. The young king grows into the emperor, and by 221 BCE, he pulls off what no one has done before, unites all of China. The last rival states crumble, their nobles dethroned, and Qin Shi Huang declares himself not just king, but Huangdi, the first emperor. This isn't modest rebranding. It's a bold new title meant to echo the mythical rulers of old. You can almost hear the sigh of millions of exhausted farmers. Finally, no more endless wars. Instead, one man now holds the mandate, and his gaze scans the horizon for what to build first. The empire is young, fragile, stitched together by conquest and decree. It needs glue, and Qin Shi Huang's favorite adhesive is construction monuments, walls, palaces, and roads. Because why stop at conquering people when you can also make them move mountains one shovel at a time? You walk into the new capital, Shenyang, bustling with scribes scratching on bamboo strips, soldiers stomping in perfect rows, and laborers hauling bricks under the sun. The emperor has decided the state itself should be a kind of machine, and every person is a cog. It's efficient, but not exactly cozy. And for you, wandering amid the noise, there's a strange, hypnotic rhythm to it. Stone laid on stone, hammer after hammer, an empire building itself by sheer repetition. This is just the beginning. Roads will stretch like veins across the land. Palaces will rise until their roofs glitter like mirages. And beneath the ground in secret, a tomb of unimaginable ambition will begin to take shape. You don't know it yet, but every step you take tonight will lead deeper into that world of endless construction. You shuffle along the new imperial roads, dust puffing up around your sandals as cartwheels creak and oxen plod forward. The first emperor has barely finished conquering the last rival state, and already he is sketching highways across his maps like a child doodling crisscross lines over a page. Only these doodles become reality, straight, wide, deliberate roads that carve through mountains and stretch across rivers. They don't bend politely around hills. They slice through them, flattening obstacles like an emperor with an overzealous ruler. These roads are the veins of Qin China, designed to move armies, tax grain, and imperial inspectors at a pace that would make earlier dynasties dizzy. You trudge along one wide enough for 6 horses abreast its surface, tamped with layers of earth and gravel. It feels solid beneath your feet, and you realize this is infrastructure, not just for convenience, but for control. Armies march faster, messages travel swifter, and officials pop up in villages like surprise guests who never bring snacks. Mainstream historians point out that Qin's road network was unprecedented in scale. Some roads radiated out from the capital like spokes on a wheel, all converging back to Shenyang. The emperor could dispatch troops in any direction, a giant playing chess with human pawns, always confident his pieces could slide across the board. Yet historians still argue whether the road system was truly efficient for trade, or simply a military tool disguised as civic progress. A quirky tidbit: travelers often used stone drums, carved markers with inscriptions to rest and leave notes along these routes. Imagine a sort of ancient roadside graffiti, except instead of "for a good time call," you'd find verses praising the emperor or, less poetically, complaints about blisters. As you continue walking, the road stretches endlessly forward, arrow straight across valleys. Villagers shuffle past, carrying baskets. Merchants drag carts of millet, and weary conscripts stomp under the watchful eyes of officers. You can almost hear the collective sigh of people who wanted peace, but instead got conscription for construction duty. Jokingly, you think if step counters existed, then every Qin farmer would have smashed the world record without even trying. Some stretches of road lead to mountain passes where laborers blast through rock with fire and water. You pause at one of these scarred cliffs, watching men heat stone with firewood, then dash cold water over it, cracking boulders so they can pry them apart. Ingenious, exhausting, and about as fun as trying to split your driveway with a teaspoon. But it works. The road presses on. The imperial roads also had standardized widths, no random wagon ruts, no sloppy lanes. Qin Shi Huang wanted uniformity down to the measurement of an ox cart axle. That way, every wheel fit neatly into every groove, reducing wear and keeping things predictable. It's the ancient equivalent of making sure all your phone chargers use the same port, except far less convenient if you're the one doing the heavy lifting. The road you follow eventually climbs into higher terrain, where way stations appear like quiet outposts. Here, imperial messengers change horses carrying bamboo strip dispatches across hundreds of miles in mere days. You imagine the hush of night as torches flicker and hoofbeats echo. Qin bureaucracy never sleeps. Or rather, it never lets anyone else sleep. And yet, not everyone is impressed. Some scholars whisper that these grand roads are vanity projects, monuments to ego more than necessity. Did Qin really need to flatten half a mountain just to shave an hour off a general's commute? Historians still debate whether the emperor's obsession with speed and standardization was visionary or just overkill. As you descend back into a plain, the road widens again, lined with guard towers. The empire is stitched together with these paths. But each tower reminds you, the stitches can unravel. Soldiers keep watch for bandits or rebels. Though in truth, most troublemakers are too tired from construction duty to even think about rebelling. Still, you wonder how long this forced unity will last once the emperor's iron hand is gone. You sit at the edge of the road as twilight falls. Oxen plod past, carts creak, and workers stumble home dusty and hungry. Overhead, the sky darkens and stars prick through. For a moment, the road seems endless, a ribbon of earth stretching beyond the horizon, a testament to both the emperor's power and the people's sweat. You can almost hear the earth itself sighing, more roads tomorrow, always more. You step off the road and into a world of palaces, one after another, each more elaborate than the last. Qin Shi Huang doesn't settle for one imperial residence. He insists on building many, like a restless homeowner who thinks the solution to boredom is just adding another wing. The capital city of Xianyang already hums with officials, soldiers, and scribes. But the emperor dreams bigger new palaces rising like stone mushrooms after rain, sprawling compounds meant to impress both mortals and the spirits of heaven. As you wander the courtyards, you notice how the scale feels exaggerated. Hallways stretch so long you could nap halfway down. Roofs are tiled and glazed ceramics that glint in the sunlight, reflecting light like mirrors of power. One palace leads into another, corridors linking buildings, until you feel lost in a maze of imperial ambition. It's said he commissioned hundreds of palaces, enough to house officials from every region of the empire, all gathered under his gaze. The logic: if you bring your nobles and bureaucrats into the capital, they're less likely to rebel in their hometowns. It's the ancient version of keeping your kids where you can see them, except your kids are full-grown aristocrats with armies. Mainstream historical records emphasize that Qin Shi Huang's palace-building spree was unprecedented. The most famous was Apang Palace, said to dwarf all others in size. Its main hall alone was described as vast enough to seat 10,000 people. But here's where the open question comes, and historians still argue whether Apang Palace was ever fully completed, or if later chroniclers exaggerated its grandeur to underline Qin's extravagance. Some suggest the ruins don't match the descriptions. Others argue the descriptions were meant more as moral lessons about excess than accurate measurements. And now for your quirky tidbit. Supposedly, Qin Shi Huang wanted his palaces connected by underground tunnels so he could travel unseen. Imagine the world's earliest attempt at a subway system, except instead of commuters reading newspapers, you've got the emperor being carted secretly between banquet halls. It's almost comical. You can picture him sneaking beneath the city like an oversized mole avoiding daylight, because paranoia told him someone up there might be plotting. As you trail through one of these grand halls, the smell of lacquer and incense fills your nose. Musicians strum zithers in the corner, their notes echoing faintly off painted walls. Courtiers shuffle on silk slippers, bowing so often, you wonder how their backs survive the day. You slip through side corridors where servants scurry with trays of rice and steaming soup. Each palace its own ecosystem of hierarchy and exhaustion, yet you sense the strain. Resources pour into construction timber stripped from forests. Stone dragged from quarries, laborers conscripted from villages that already feel hollowed out. For the emperor palaces are symbols of central power, but for the people, they are backbreaking obligations. Imagine being told to pause your harvest and instead go haul beams for a hall you'll never enter. Jokingly, you think the Qin could have invented the world's first palace fatigue. Too many halls, too little gratitude. Scholars still puzzle over how much of these descriptions reflect reality, and how much was written later by Han Dynasty historians trying to paint Qin as wasteful. Were there truly hundreds of palaces? Did Epang Palace really tower above all? The debate remains open, and you are left walking through shadowy ruins that whisper of grandeur, but keep their secrets. Night falls over the capital, and lanterns glow in long rows along colonnades. You pass through gardens where artificial hills rise, miniature landscapes built so the emperor could stroll through all of China in one evening if he wished. Streams are redirected pavilions, placed just so every pebble arranged for imperial leisure. And yet, it feels strangely lonely. The more palaces rise, the more the emperor distances himself from the very people who built them. You pause beneath a carved pillar, listening to the faint rustle of silk and the clink of wine cups in the distance. Above, the stars are blotted out by the tiled roof stretching over your head. You realize that in Qin Shi Huang's world, there is no ceiling too high, no hall too long, no project too endless. Each palace is both monument and mirror, reflecting the emperor's restless need to build, until the night swallows the courtyards and you drift onward, deeper into his empire of stone. You leave the capital's glittering halls and head north where the landscape grows harsher. Wind slicing across your cheeks, dust stinging your eyes. Here on the empire's edge, the first emperor dreams not of palaces, but of walls so vast they could hem in entire tribes. This is the earliest incarnation of what later generations will call the Great Wall. Though, at this point, it's less postcard-perfect stone battlements and more packed earth piled high by weary hands and sheer determination. You trudge alongside laborers who are stacking tamped earth in layers, pounding it with heavy wooden mallets until it hardens like stone. The rhythm is relentless. Thud, 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 a sleepy drumbeat echoing across the hills. Sometimes they use quarried stone, but more often it's simply soil and reeds, whatever the landscape provides. It doesn't look glamorous, but stretched across hundreds of miles, it creates a barrier that feels imposing, if not entirely impenetrable. Mainstream historians remind us that Qin Shi Huang didn't invent the idea of border walls. Earlier states had built their own defensive ramparts, but he did something new. He ordered them connected, expanded, and standardized, turning scattered fortifications into one long serpent slithering across the ridges. Soldiers patrol the ridges, their bronze helmets glinting, while below them, peasants drag baskets of soil grumbling as though their lives weren't hard enough already. And yet historians still argue whether this early Qin wall was really a continuous line or more a patchwork of fortresses and ridges. Some say the notion of one seamless wall is later romanticism woven into legend by poets who loved neat imagery. Others argue the sheer manpower Qin commanded made it feasible. The truth is likely muddier, quite literally, since much of the wall was made of mud. For your quirky tidbit tonight, travelers at the time reported that wall guards sometimes planted crops along the ramparts, turning military defenses into oddly elevated gardens. Imagine strolling along the frontier and finding beans sprouting neatly beside a lookout tower. An ancient multitasking approach guard against nomads harvest dinner at the same time. You climb a section yourself, boots slipping in the loose earth. The wind whistles across the steppe, carrying with it the distant sound of horse hooves, nomadic raiders probing the border. The wall is not just construction, it's psychology. It tells the empire's enemies, this far, no farther. It tells the emperor's subjects, we control even the horizon. And it tells you, stumbling breathlessly along its length, maybe don't skip leg day if you're hauling bricks up here. As night falls, fires flicker in beacon towers spaced at intervals. Soldiers keep watch, ready to light signal flares if raiders approach. You imagine the system in action, a sudden torch lit in one tower, passed like a fiery whisper down the line until the capital knows within hours that trouble brews hundreds of miles away. It's impressive, a primitive telegraph of smoke and flame, though you suspect the message sometimes boiled down to still rating still cold. You rest at the base of the wall, leaning against a pile of discarded baskets. The smell of packed earth sweat and campfire smoke lingers in the air. All around you, the empire's ambitions are solidifying quite literally in front of your eyes. The first emperor believes walls can freeze history in place, but you sense something more fragile for every stone lifted. A sigh escapes for every tamped mound, a complaint mutters. The wall rises, but so too does the weight on the people's shoulders. You close your eyes, lulled by the steady hammering above the wind, humming through the gaps, and the endless sense that Qin Shi Huang is not building for a season, or even a lifetime. He is building for forever. Whether forever agrees well, that is another story entirely. You leave the dust of the wall behind and step back into the heart of the empire, where Qin Shi Huang is not content with just walls and palaces. He wants order you can see, touch, and measure. This is the era of standardization, where everything from coins to cart axles becomes uniform, because the emperor believes unity must be hammered into daily life as firmly as roads into mountains. You sit with a merchant in a busy marketplace, baskets of millet and bolts of silk arrayed before him. He jingles coins in his hand, round bronze discs with square holes in the center. They look neat, stackable, easy to string on a cord. Before Qin's reforms, each region minted its own currency, knife-shaped coins, spade-shaped coins, some even so awkward you wonder if anyone bothered using them at all. Qin Shi Huang sweeps that mess away, introducing one standardized form, so that a trader from the north can buy goods in the south without needing to swap half a dozen shapes. It's as if he decided overnight that everyone's plugs and outlets should match. Suddenly trade flows more smoothly, if not more cheerfully. Mainstream historians highlight that this monetary standardization was one of Qin's lasting legacies. But coins were only the beginning. Weights and measures followed, carefully calibrated, so that a pound of grain meant the same in every village, not just depending on how generous the local tax collector felt. Roads were designed with consistent axle widths, meaning every cart's wheels lined neatly into the same ruts. The emperor's obsession with uniformity trickled down into daily life, shaping how people farmed, traveled, and traded. And yet historians still argue whether this standardization was embraced eagerly or endured grudgingly. Was it progress smoothing commerce and governance, or was it tyranny stripping regions of their identities and forcing them into the emperor's mold? The records leave gaps, and the debate remains as stubbornly uneven as those old unstandardized roadways. For a quirky tidbit, Qin's script reforms, yes, even writing got standardized, meant brushstrokes had to conform to one approved style. If you've ever been scolded for bad handwriting, imagine that multiplied by an entire bureaucracy. Calligraphy wasn't just an art, it was statecraft. Officials could read across provinces without confusion, but poets probably grumbled that their flourishes were no longer acceptable. Picture a creative scholar sulking in the corner because his swirly dragon character had been flattened into something practical. You watch scribes hunched over bamboo slips, dipping brushes into ink recording taxes and decrees in the newly standardized script. The scratch of brush on bamboo becomes part of the empire's hum, as much a soundtrack as hammers on the wall or axes in the forest. Somewhere nearby, a magistrate measures grain with a standardized vessel, tipping it carefully, so that no farmer can argue the measure is unfair. Uniformity is both reassurance and burden. It simplifies life, but squeezes out variety. In the countryside, peasants haul carts with perfectly fitting axles, trudging along rutted roads that guide their path like rails. It's practical, efficient, but also eerie. Everyone's wheels rolling in the same grooves, like destiny itself has been pre-carved. You can't help but imagine a modern driver complaining, "All the lanes are the same width." Where's the fun in that? As the sun sets, you wander into a government storehouse. Inside, sacks of millet are stacked in tiny rows, each labeled with the same units of weight. Officials in crisp robes check tallies their bamboo slips uniform in both script and numbers. The atmosphere is strangely soothing, like watching 1,000 pieces click neatly into place. And yet, behind the calm order, you sense the restless drive of one man who cannot stand irregularity. You lean against the storehouse doorframe, breathing in the musty smell of grain and ink, and realize that Qin Shi Huang has not only conquered kingdoms, he has conquered difference. Where once there was variety, now there is uniformity. Whether it is a blessing or a burden is left to time. But for you drifting in the twilight, the steady rhythm of order has its own lull, as if the empire itself is whispering, "Same, same, same forever." You drift now toward the rivers, where the land itself has been carved open and redirected by the emperor's engineers. If Qin Shi Huang believed roads were the veins of his empire, then canals were its arteries carrying grain soldiers and messages through watery channels that glisten in the sun. You stand at the edge of a newly dug trench, so deep you can't see the bottom, without leaning dangerously forward, and you watch workers shovel mud in endless rhythm, their backs bent like bows. The most famous of these waterworks is the Zhengguo Canal, a feat so ambitious it sounds like a fairy tale until you see it stretching across the plains of Shanxi. Dug to irrigate the dry fields of the Wei Valley, it turns barren soil into a patchwork of green. Farmers who once scratched at dust now lead water into their paddies, shaking their heads at the irony that their emperor, so feared, so strict, has gifted them rice in abundance. The project transforms not only agriculture, but the very lifeblood of the Qin state. Mainstream historians emphasize that the Zhengguo Canal was crucial to Qin's rise, feeding both people and armies, ensuring the empire's dominance long after the last war drums faded. But historians still argue whether the canal was truly conceived as a gift for the people, or whether it was at its heart a tool of conquest, filling granaries that would sustain endless campaigns. Some even whisper that its origin story, built by an engineer from a rival state who intended to bankrupt Qin with the massive labor costs, adds a twist of intrigue. Was it sabotage that backfired into genius or vision from the start? The debate, like the canal's current, flows on. For your quirky tidbit travelers along the canal, sometimes floated offerings of fruit and rice downstream, thanking the river spirits for their cooperation. Picture a farmer gently pushing a basket of apples into the water, muttering prayers that the emperor's engineers hadn't angered any unseen deities. Half religion, half superstition, and half insurance policy. Because when your harvest depends on a ditch holding together, you hedge your bets. You step onto a barge loaded with sacks of millet, the wooden hull creaking beneath your feet. The current pulls you slowly forward, past embankments lined with reeds. Soldiers wave from posts along the banks, part security, part toll collectors, part audience for your clumsy balancing act as the barge rocks. Overhead, the sky is mirrored in the water, broken only by the splash of oars. The journey is oddly soothing, like being rocked to sleep in the emperor's oversized cradle of irrigation. The canals also serve the military. You can almost see the troops marching alongside their rations shipped by water, sparing them the misery of overland drudgery. The Qin state becomes mobile in a way rivals never dreamed of. Food weapons officials all glide down these liquid highways. Its efficiency, mixed with intimidation, the rivers themselves now bow to imperial will. But the cost is steep. Whole villages are emptied of men to dig and haul. Fields are left untended, while peasants are conscripted their families, scraping by in their absence. You hear grumbles in the night, whispered complaints, carried on the breeze. How much more can be built before the empire breaks? Yet the water flows, the grain grows, and the emperor's vision marches forward, indifferent to exhaustion. As dusk settles, you step off the barge, the damp boards slick under your sandals. The canal glimmers like a silver ribbon in the fading light, its current carrying whispers of both gratitude and resentment. You lie back on the grassy bank, listening to the gentle lapping of water, and realize you are caught in the tide of Qin Shi Huang's ambition. Every ripple seems to say the same thing: the emperor is never finished. He builds on land, he builds on stone, and now he builds on water. Always building, always endless. You follow the canals inland, the smell of wet soil fading as you climb into the hills where the air grows quieter. Here whispers tell of something far larger, far stranger, and far more secret than roads or walls. Qin Shi Huang, restless even in thoughts of his own death, begins planning a tomb unlike anything the world has ever seen. You wander toward the site, though it is not yet complete, and you sense that every shovel of dirt is pulled by both human hands and imperial paranoia. The first emperor believes he will rule forever, if not in life, then certainly in the afterlife. So he sets in motion an underground palace meant to mirror his empire. Imagine an entire city beneath the earth, filled with halls, stables, offices, gardens, and even rivers of mercury, said to flow like liquid silver through darkness. You tread carefully, feeling the crunch of gravel beneath your sandals, picturing the unseen workers digging, carving, and arranging a subterranean kingdom that no living commoner will ever glimpse. Mainstream historical records state that more than 700,000 laborers were conscripted to build this mausoleum, their sweat and blood poured into shaping a mountain of earth that still towers today near modern Xi'an. It was begun as soon as he took the throne and consumed decades of toil. Yet historians still argue whether the fabled rivers of mercury and automated crossbows inside the tomb are fact or legend. Ancient texts describe them vividly, but excavations remain cautious, respectful, and perhaps fearful of disturbing what lies sealed. And here's your quirky tidbit. Some stories claim the tomb was fitted with traps, crossbows rigged to fire at intruders, ancient booby traps lying in wait like the world's most over-engineered keep-out sign. Picture an archaeologist brushing dust from a passageway, only to be met by a 2,000-year-old dart saying, "Surprise." Whether it's true or myth, it's the kind of detail that makes you glance over your shoulder even now. You wander the surface above the tomb site. Workers heave baskets of soil, piling them higher into the shape of an artificial hill. Overseers bark orders, their voices rising above the groans of thousands of laborers. At night, fires flicker on the horizon, a ghostly reminder that while the emperor sleeps in his palace, his afterlife is being constructed just as obsessively. You imagine lying in a peasant hut nearby, listening to the muffled thuds underground, wondering if the earth itself is groaning with the weight of ambition. The idea is staggering, an eternal city beneath your feet, designed to sustain the emperor's soul. While most people prepare for the afterlife with a few offerings of food or tokens, Qin Shi Huang demands an empire below, complete with celestial rivers, jeweled ceilings, and armies to guard him. It's excess to the point of absurdity, but it also reveals the depth of his fear. Fear of mortality, fear of being forgotten, fear of losing control even after death. Historians debate whether the scale of the tomb drained the Qin state's resources, or whether it was simply one more project in a list of endless demands. Some believe the weight of these constructions, roads, walls, palaces, canals, and tomb, helped doom the dynasty soon after the emperor's death. Others argue the Qin collapse was inevitable with or without the tomb's massive expense. You lean against a tree, listening to the cicadas buzz, and wonder if perhaps both are true. The tomb was both marvel and burden, legacy and liability. The night deepens, and the hill looms larger in the dark. Fires fade, workers slump in exhaustion, and silence seeps across the landscape. You stare at the mound and realize that one day, centuries from now, this tomb will still hold its secrets. But for now, you can feel it growing stone by stone, secret by secret, a monument to one man's refusal to ever let go. You drift away from the surface mound and into the subterranean echoes, following faint whispers of clay kilns and chisels. Beneath the earth, armies take shape, armies not of flesh and bone, but of fired earth, molded into soldiers who will never grow hungry, never desert, and never mutter complaints about back pay. You are in the presence of the terracotta guardians, rows upon rows of silent warriors commissioned to protect the emperor for eternity. The space feels endless. Lanterns flicker dimly, and you catch glimpses of faces, each soldier unique, as if sculptors conspired to give them individual personalities. Some wear stern expressions, others faint smirks. One or two look as though they have just been told the world's worst joke, but have to stand guard anyway. Historians confirm this detail: no two soldiers are identical. The artisans shape them with deliberate variation. Different hairstyles, mustaches, armor, and postures. Like an enormous clay census, a population of guardians, frozen in formation. Mainstream historians note that these figures were arranged in precise military order: infantry at the front, archers to the sides, generals with elaborate armor at the rear. It's not random. It's a replica of Qin's actual battle formations. You step between the rows, the clay feet crunching the earth softly under your own. They stand silent, eternal comrades in a kingdom of shadows. And yet historians still argue why so much effort went into sculpting an army no living person would ever see once sealed. Was it true belief in the afterlife, a fear that his ghostly empire required military defense? Or was it a symbolic gesture, an emperor demonstrating his might even underground? The debate remains unsolved, as quiet and immovable as the soldiers themselves. Here's your quirky tidbit. Some soldiers originally carried real bronze weapons, swords, spears, crossbows, still sharp thousands of years later, thanks to ancient anti-rust coatings. Imagine the surprise of archaeologists realizing these weren't just statues, but a ready-to-arm garrison. You picture a clay soldier sighing in relief. Finally, a decent sword to go with my stiff posture. You wander farther, passing chariots drawn by clay horses. The detail is astonishing. Muscles, carved harnesses, modeled even nostrils flared as if the animals were mid-breath. The artisans didn't stop at soldiers. They recreated the full apparatus of war. Stable boys, musicians, officials, all crafted in miniature or life-size, an entire support system, meant to serve the emperor below. The air grows warmer as you approach a kiln site, where artisans once fired these figures day and night. The heat must have been unbearable, the work endless. Imagine sculpting a soldier's face with exquisite care, knowing it would soon vanish into darkness, never admired, never remembered, except perhaps by the spirits. Some scholars suspect this anonymity was part of the point, thousands of artisans contributing to one emperor's immortality. Their own names erased their fingerprints, immortalized only in clay. As you move deeper, silence presses close. The terracotta army seems to breathe with you, their presence overwhelming, as though you've stumbled into a gathering that began 2,200 years ago and never adjourned. Their stares don't shift, but somehow you feel watched, as if the emperor's command lingers. Stand guard. Wait. The enormity of it seeps in slowly. Thousands of figures, hundreds of chariots, more than any single tomb had ever contained before. You tilt your head back, gazing at the cavern ceiling above, and wonder how much farther the underground city extends. How many more chambers remain undiscovered? Some archaeologists believe only a fraction has been unearthed. The rest sleeps in silence. At last you step out of formation, leaving the rows behind, but the impression lingers. Even as you walk away, you feel as though an army of clay footsteps follows. You glance back once, just to be sure, and there they are, forever in place, forever guarding. Qin Shi Huang may have feared death, but here in this endless garrison, he has ensured he will never be alone. You leave the underground army behind, but the emperor's obsessions don't stop at clay soldiers or canals. Now he turns his gaze to the heavens, or perhaps more accurately, to the apothecary shelves cluttered with mysterious powders and potions. Qin Shi Huang cannot stand the idea of mortality, and so he embarks on projects stranger than any wall or palace, the search for immortality. You step into a chamber where alchemists hunch over bronze cauldrons, flames licking upward as strange fumes swirl. The air reeks of minerals, cinnabar, mercury, and substances that shimmer unnaturally in the firelight. The alchemists murmur incantations, grind powders, and mix concoctions that promise eternal life. You watch the emperor sip from a cup, his expression unreadable, as if bracing for either enlightenment or indigestion. Historians agree that Qin Shi Huang ingested mercury-based potions, a tragic irony, since these likely damaged his health rather than preserved it. The first emperor, so desperate to live forever, was slowly poisoning himself, and yet historians still argue how seriously he believed in the alchemist's claims. Was he gullible, genuinely convinced these elixirs worked? Or was he hedging bets, treating immortality as an experiment worth any risk? The chronicles leave room for doubt, and scholars debate whether his quest was sincere faith or desperate superstition. For your quirky tidbit, some legends say Qin Shi Huang sent expeditions eastward across the sea, searching for mythical islands where immortals lived. Entire fleets of young men and women were dispatched carrying seeds and animals told not to return until they found eternal life. Some never came back. Historians speculate they may have simply settled in unknown lands rather than face imperial disappointment. You imagine a sailor stepping ashore somewhere foreign, shrugging and declaring, "Guess this is home now." Sorry, Emperor. You trail through the laboratories, the glow of the fire warming your skin. Bronze cauldrons bubble, releasing vapors that sting your eyes. Alchemists adjust formulas, adding jade dust, animal bones, even dew collected from sacred peaks. The recipes sound like something between a wizard's spellbook and a questionable smoothie recipe. Yet the Emperor clings to the hope-sipping elixir after elixir, convinced that one day one mixture will unlock forever. The irony presses heavily. While palaces rise, roads stretch, and armies stand eternal in clay, the man who commands them all is vulnerable to time, just as fragile as the peasants hauling stones. His obsession with immortality is both comic and tragic, a reminder that no construction can outbuild mortality itself. And yet, in the flickering light, you feel his determination like a drumbeat: build walls, canals, tombs, soldiers, and even cheat death. No project is too vast. You sit at the edge of the alchemist's chamber, watching sparks leap from the fire. Somewhere outside, workers hammer stones into place, roads stretch farther, towers rise higher. Here within the Emperor's grasp, another project unfolds, invisible and inward, the attempt to conquer the body itself. Whether doomed or destined, it consumes him as surely as any palace foundation or tomb chamber. As night deepens, the air grows heavy with fumes. You close your eyes and feel the hum of ambition pressing all around. Roads, palaces, walls, canals, tombs, soldiers, elixirs. It's all one endless construction project, and the Emperor will never be finished. Not even with himself. You leave behind the smoky chambers of alchemists and drift out into the countryside, where the Emperor's ambition touches not just stone and bronze, but entire human lives. Qin Shi Huang doesn't simply build structures. He moves people, whole populations, shuffled like pieces on his vast chessboard. You walk along a dirt road crowded with families, ox carts, groaning bundles strapped to backs. Farmers are being relocated, ordered to settle in new lands to feed the swelling appetite of his growing cities. The policy is blunt: uproot communities from one end of the empire and plant them in another, especially in conquered territories. It's a tactic both practical and cruel, designed to dilute local loyalties and ensure new lands are productive. You pass by weary faces, children tugging on their mother's sleeves, elders leaning heavily on sticks. These aren't volunteers. They are pawns in the Emperor's endless rearrangement. Mainstream historians explain that the Qin dynasty forcibly resettled tens of thousands, sometimes even entire noble families, shifting populations to consolidate power. In newly conquered zones, farmers were installed to work fertile fields, their presence a living claim of Qin ownership. Meanwhile, nobles from former rival states were hauled to the capital, where their gilded captivity kept them far from their old power bases. Qin Shi Huang's empire was not only built of stone and clay, but of flesh relocated and reordered like building blocks. Yet historians still argue whether these migrations were efficient or destabilizing. Did they truly strengthen the empire by scattering resistance? Or did they sow resentment, displacing people from ancestral lands and fueling the anger that would later erupt against the dynasty. The debate lingers like the dust stirred by carts along the road. For your quirky tidbit, some records suggest the emperor once ordered thousands of wealthy families to move near his palaces so he could keep an eye on them, then promptly renamed their streets after auspicious virtues like Loyalty Lane and Harmony Avenue. You imagine a disgruntled aristocrat muttering, "I live on Loyalty Lane now, but don't ask me to smile about it." As you follow the caravan, you notice guards stationed at intervals ensuring no one strays. The relocated families shuffle along in silence, the sound of their sandals dragging over dirt, filling the night air. Ahead, new settlements rise hastily, rows of huts, fields, freshly plowed canals dug to carry water. The empire expands, not only by conquering armies, but by transplanting lives like a gardener replanting crops into new soil. At night, you sit near a fire with one such family. They share rice, bitterly thin, and talk quietly of the home they left behind. The stars above feel the same, but everything else has shifted. Their voices carry both resignation and simmering resentment. You realize that while walls and palaces leave visible scars on the landscape, these forced migrations leave invisible ones. Memories uprooted, traditions fractured. The crackle of the fire dies down, and the caravan prepares to move again at dawn. You close your eyes and hear the shuffle of thousands trudging across fields, driven by an emperor who cannot sit still, who builds not just monuments, but whole new maps of human settlement. For him, people are another resource to be moved, stacked, and shaped. For them, it is endless walking, endless leaving, endless rebuilding. You wander back toward the capital, where the roads hum with traffic and the palaces loom in the haze. But amid the glitter of order, you feel a strange hush. Qin Shi Huang, who standardized coins and canals, also tried to standardize thought. He feared that unruly ideas could unravel the empire faster than any nomadic raid. And so, he launched one of his most infamous projects, censorship. You slip into a courtyard where scholars once debated freely, only to find silence hanging as heavy as the stone walls. The emperor's edicts are blunt, all histories that glorify rival states, all philosophies that question legalism, all teachings that threaten obedience, they must vanish. Books are gathered, stacked, and burned. In your imagination, bamboo slips crackle in flames, the ink curling into smoke words, disappearing into night. The firelight dances across anxious faces, scholars watching centuries of thought consumed in an evening. Mainstream historical accounts claim this burning of books happened around 213 BCE, targeting Confucian texts in particular. Yet historians still argue whether the event was as absolute as legend suggests. Was it truly a wholesale annihilation of knowledge, or later exaggeration by the Han Dynasty to make Qin look barbaric? The debate flickers like the very fire it describes, uncertain but persistent. For your quirky tidbit, some tales insist that not all books were lost. Clever scholars hid bamboo slips inside walls under floorboards, or even buried them in fields like intellectual squirrels stashing acorns. You picture one muttering, "Hide this analect's scroll behind the pigsty. No one will look there." Centuries later, fragments supposedly re-emerged, a secret archive that outlasted flames. But censorship didn't stop with books. The emperor famously ordered some dissenting scholars buried alive, their voices silenced along with their writings. Again, historians debate the scale: is it fact or Han propaganda? The uncertainty lingers, leaving you uneasy as you walk past the silent courtyards, imagining muffled debates that will never be heard again. The atmosphere in the capital changes. Where once lively arguments echoed, now officials recite decrees in careful monotone, terrified of missteps. You pass a classroom where children practice the new standardized script, their brushes steady, their teachers stern. Creativity is trimmed, discipline sharpened. Knowledge becomes a controlled current, flowing only where the emperor permits. At night, you walk past one of the emptied libraries. The shelves bear the air thick with smoke residue. The silence is almost heavier than the fires. Somewhere in the distance, workers still hammer roads, still dig canals, still haul stones for walls. But here, in the intellectual heart of the empire, the hammer is invisible, striking ideas instead of earth. You settle against a column, the stone cool against your back, and think of the scholars' debates, cut short, their words drifting upward as smoke. The emperor builds endlessly, yes, but he also destroys, reshaping not only landscapes, but minds. The hush spreads, and you find yourself whispering without meaning to, as though the air itself has been trained not to speak too loudly. You rise from the silent courtyards of censored thought and drift once more toward the empire's edges, where the air is sharp, the horizon wide, and the emperor's hand stretches into raw frontier lands. Qin Shi Huang does not trust empty borders. He builds not only walls, but fortresses, outposts, studding the landscape like pins holding down a map. You climb a ridge and spot one squat square made of stone and tamped earth, its watchtowers peering over the wilderness. Soldiers pace the ramparts, their bronze helmets catching the pale sun. Below them, peasants who've been relocated to till new fields glance upward, nervously reminded that the empire's eyes are everywhere. The fortresses are not grand like palaces, but they are steady, practical, and frankly repetitive. You've seen one fortress, you've seen most of them. Still, they form a network of vigilance designed to project imperial authority across every mountain pass and river crossing. Mainstream historians note that Qin outposts stretched deep into what are now northern and western regions of China, garrisoned with soldiers supplied via those great roads and canals you've already trudged beside. They served as both deterrent and tax office, making sure nomads thought twice before raiding, and farmers remembered their tribute. Yet historians still argue whether these fortresses truly secured the frontier or simply drained resources, leaving weary garrisons isolated and resentful. Were they symbols of strength or seeds of weakness? The debate echoes across the stones, as persistent as the wind. And here's your quirky tidbit. Some fortress sites have yielded game pieces carved from bone, suggesting that off-duty soldiers pass their long hours playing ludo or throwing dice. Picture a guard leaning on his spear, muttering, "If the Huns don't show up by sunset, it's your turn to lose the next round." Defense and boredom side by side. You enter one of these garrisons. Inside the walls enclose a barracks where soldiers nap on straw mats, weapons stacked neatly at their sides. The air smells of dried meat sweat and damp clay. A cook stirs a pot of millet porridge, ladling out rations that look as exciting as wet cardboard, but keep stomachs full. Horses stamp in stables, their breath steaming in the cold. It feels like a village, trapped inside walls, every aspect directed toward vigilance. From the watchtower, the view is both breathtaking and lonely. Mountains roll out in waves, rivers snake through valleys, and beyond them stretches the unknown tribes moving with herds, the steppe unfurling like an endless ocean. You imagine the silence of winter nights here, broken only by the snap of frost and the occasional nervous shout when shadows move too quickly. The empire presses its footprint out here, but you can feel the land pushing back, vast and indifferent. Down below, masons patch cracks in the walls, reinforcing foundations against erosion. Even fortresses meant to embody permanence require endless upkeep. You realize that the emperor is not only building, he is rebuilding constantly, forcing his people into a cycle where construction never ends. Soldiers train laborers, repair administrators, tally supplies, always repetitive, always unceasing. You sit for a while at the tower's edge, wind pulling at your clothes, and wonder how many lives were consumed by these outposts. For those stationed here, the empire must have felt both close and impossibly far, orders arriving from the capital, carried on the very roads you once walked, dictating daily life down to rations and rotations. And yet, when the torches are lit at night, the fortress glows like a lantern in the dark, one more flicker in Qin Shi Huang's constellation of control. You descend from the watchtower of the frontier fortress and return toward villages that hum with uneasy whispers. For all the emperor's roads, canals, and fortresses, there's a crack spreading beneath the surface rumors of rebellion. You sit near a communal fire, listening as peasants mutter about the endless labor conscriptions, the impossible taxes, and the sheer exhaustion of building, hauling, and marching without pause. Their words are soft, but their faces are worn raw. The empire's greatness rests on their shoulders, yet those shoulders are buckling. Mainstream historians note that by the end of Qin Shi Huang's reign, discontent simmered everywhere. Millions had been conscripted for walls, tombs, palaces, and canals. Farms were abandoned, while men hauled stones, leaving families hungry. Soldiers patrolled not just borders, but villages, ensuring obedience through fear. The emperor believed this was stability. The people felt it as suffocation, and yet historians still argue what role this unrest truly played in Qin's collapse. Was it the sheer exhaustion of the population, ready to erupt once the emperor died? Or was it political mismanagement by his successors who lacked his iron grip? The truth, as usual, lies somewhere in the smoke, frustration building, slowly then bursting into fire when the moment came. For your quirky tidbit, some stories claim workers conscripted for construction would sneak hidden messages into brick-short carvings that cursed the emperor or prayed for rebellion. Imagine hauling a block of stone only to notice faint scratches reading down with endless labor. Ancient graffiti buried in mortar waiting centuries to be noticed. You walk along a half-finished road, the worksite abandoned for the night. The tools lie scattered: mallets, baskets, chisels. The air is heavy with the smell of dirt and sweat that lingers even in silence. In the distance, a group of peasants huddles, voices low. You can't catch every word, but the tone is sharp complaints about missed harvests, lost sons, and an emperor who demands endlessly, but never gives rest. The irony isn't lost on you. Qin Shi Huang believed building was the path to eternity, but every stone raised also laid the foundation of resentment. The walls and roads are strong, but human patience is brittle. You imagine a future where these same roads carry rebels as easily as they once carried imperial armies. As night settles, the murmurs grow quiet, but they don't vanish. They sink into the soil like seeds, waiting for rain. You lie back against a half-built wall, staring up at stars that blink with steady calm, and wonder if even the heavens can sense the cracks forming below. You rise from the restless villages and join the imperial caravan, a moving city of soldiers, scribes, palanquin bearers, and cooks. Qin Shi Huang cannot sit still. He tours his empire endlessly, checking roads, inspecting canals, and reminding distant provinces who rules them. You walk among the procession, the steady clop of horses, and the creak of carts, forming a rhythm that could lull you to sleep, if not for the sheer spectacle. The emperor travels with hundreds, perhaps thousands of attendants. Palanquins sway, banners flutter, and drums announce his approach. You shuffle along dusty highways he himself ordered, built watching peasants kneel in ditches as the convoy rolls past. The sheer scale is dizzying, one man carried like a god, while the earth trembles under the weight of his entourage. Mainstream historians note that these imperial tours served several purposes: inspecting construction projects, reinforcing authority in far-flung territories, and, perhaps, feeding the emperor's own paranoia. He believed moving constantly made him harder to assassinate a ruler. Hiding in plain sight amid ceaseless motion. Yet historians still argue whether these tours were truly effective governance or just restless spectacle. Did they strengthen the empire or merely tire it out along with its ruler? Here's your quirky tidbit: records suggest Qin Shi Huang sometimes issued decrees, while on the road scribes scrambling to jot them down on bamboo strips balanced across jolting carts. Imagine trying to write imperial law while your ox cart hits every pothole, leaving shaky brushstrokes that future historians puzzle over. Did he mean tax relief or axe relief? One scribe mutters. You trudge with the caravan as it crosses rivers by pontoon bridges and climbs into mountain passes where watchtowers peak like stone eyebrows above the ridges. Each province greets the emperor with hurried ceremonies, offerings, and rows of bowing officials. New monuments sprout like weeds wherever he passes. Arches, steles, shrines, each one proclaiming his presence, as though he fears the earth might forget he walked there. But the caravan is exhausting both for those who serve and those who watch. Soldiers collapse by fires at night, their armor dented, their sandals worn thin. Cooks boil vats of millet gruel, feeding the procession that never stops. Villagers sigh as their fields are trampled by oxen and officials demand supplies. You feel the weariness in your own steps each day's march, blending into the next. And still the emperor does not rest. Even in the night torches light his path, and rumors spread of hidden tunnels or decoys used to mislead would-be assassins. His paranoia hums in the air like an unseen drumbeat, pushing the caravan forward. Every road is checked, every fortress inspected, every canal judged. It is governance by motion, empire as perpetual march. You fall asleep to the sound of hooves and awaken to the same. The imperial tour is endless, like all his projects, always moving, always building, never finished. And somewhere in the dust and noise you realize that even as the emperor tours his empire, he is also fleeing something he cannot escape: time itself. The caravan drifts farther down the endless roads, and you trail behind your feet. Heavy, your mind thick with the hum of construction commands and ceaseless ambition. Qin Shi Huang is aging now, though he would never admit it. His obsession with immortality only deepening. But even as his body begins to falter, his projects remain: relentless walls, patched canals, dredged palaces, expanded tombs, deepened armies drilled. For every breath he takes, a hammer falls somewhere in the empire, a cartwheel turns, a stone is dragged into place. Mainstream historians remind us that his legacy is vast. The unification of China, the standardized systems that lasted for centuries, the awe-inspiring monuments that still whisper his name. Yet historians still argue whether his dynasty fell because of his very excesses. The endless building that drained resources, the censorship that silenced wise counsel, the relocations that uprooted loyalties. Did he build too much, too fast, too harshly? The question lingers like dust on the roads he carved. For your quirky tidbit, some later stories claim the emperor's burial mound was once covered with trees and grass so lush that locals believed it was a natural hill. Imagine stumbling past it. Centuries later, sheep grazing on top, unaware that beneath their hooves lay rivers of mercury clay armies and a city of the dead. An emperor's eternity disguised as a pasture. You wander now among ruins, though at the time they are fresh constructions, stone fortresses rising roads, gleaming palaces buzzing. Yet your perspective drifts, and you see them also as shadows half buried in soil, their outlines softened by centuries. Time itself becomes another builder reshaping what the emperor left behind. His roads crumble, his palaces fade, his dynasty collapses within years of his death. And still his name endures tied forever to ambition without end. You pause beneath the looming burial mound, the air quiet, the earth heavy with secrets. Above you, the sky stretches calm and endless, in stark contrast to the restless empire below. Qin Shi Huang dreamed of forever, but forever does not bend easily to human will. You breathe in slow and steady, listening to the faint rustle of wind across the grass, and realize that sometimes the greatest monuments are not the ones built, but the lessons whispered by their ruins. And so the story slows. The clang of hammers softens. The shuffle of laborers fades into murmurs. The dust of the road settles. You lie back against the hillside, letting the stars drift above you, and feel the weight of all that endless building dissolve into stillness. The emperor's ambition stretches on, but your eyelids grow heavy. Now let the night carry you gently. The walls recede into darkness, the canals into silence, the palaces into dreams. The clay soldiers stand watch, but their stares are softer now, less menacing, more like guardians of sleep. The emperor's voice grows faint, his commands swallowed by distance. What remains is only the hum of history, quiet and soothing, like a lullaby carved in stone. Close your eyes, breathe slowly, and let the empire fade. The projects are endless, yes, but your night does not need to be. Here in the calm after the hammering, you can finally rest. And now, as we leave behind the endless building and the restless emperor, let your mind wander gently toward calm. The roads you walked stretch out behind you, but you no longer feel the dust under your feet. The palaces, the fortresses, the canals, they soften in memory, becoming distant silhouettes fading into twilight. What lingers is not the weight of labor, but the steady rhythm that carried you here, each hammer stroke, each footstep, each whispered command, blending into a quiet background hum. Breathe in slowly as though you're inhaling the cool night air from a Qin hillside. Hold it gently. Then let it out long and soft, like the sigh of wind across grass that grows over old stones. The emperor's ambitions are heavy, but you don't need to carry them. With each breath, the load slips away. You may picture the clay guardians still standing in their silent ranks. Once they were meant for war, for vigilance, for the defense of an emperor's restless spirit. But here now in the stillness, they stand for something else. Watchful, peace, quiet companionship, a reminder that you are never alone as you drift into rest. The stars overhead shine steady, ancient, and calm, far older than any dynasty, far older than walls and tombs. Their light falls gently on you, softening your thoughts, slowing your heartbeat. You're safe. You're steady. You're ready to sink into sleep. So let your eyes close fully now. Let the dust settle, the fires dim, the drums quiet. Let history fold itself away like a scroll tucked neatly into silence. Sleep comes easily, and with it, rest deeper than stone, calmer than rivers, longer than any empire.